Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady, America's #1 small business expert. And I'm so excited to welcome you to our very first show of 2023. Tonight's Small Biz Chat podcast is going to be an amazing show. We're going to be talking about how to get started with federal contracting. And if you're interested in becoming a better communicator in your small business, I've got the expert here for that. And how many of us out here as business owners are trying to manage stress and avoid burnout? Well, I have an expert here that's going to help all of us do better with our daily stress. Now, if you're looking to grow your business through government contracts, you are certainly in the right place. It's complicated, and my expert's going to break it down bite-sized. So if that's a new market you want to pursue, you're going to know how to get started with that. And then, we've got multiple generations in the workplace, and that's making communication and culture a little difficult. So we're going to talk to a leadership expert who's going to help all of us really relate better to our colleagues and employees in the workplace. And lastly, one of the things that people believe that stress is part of the deal. But my guest is a contrarian who says absolutely not. He believes that stress is avoidable. And he's going to tell all of us his secrets so that we can get better with managing our businesses. Now, here on the Small Biz Chat podcast, we talk about how to start and grow a successful small business from multiple angles. This is advice you otherwise would have to pay for, but we make it available every month because we want to make sure that you have the tools you need to take your business to the next level. Now, the Small Biz Chat podcast is a peer-to-peer mentoring show, and our mission is to end small business failure. Hopefully, you're watching us on my Small Biz Lady Facebook fan page or on our YouTube channel. And by the way, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe and share and leave a comment and tell us a topic that you'd like us to discuss. We're happy to do that for you. Now, I am so excited to introduce my guest. Today's first guest is LaQuan McCarley, and she is our government contracting expert with Verve Consultants, Inc. We're also going to be talking to Meredith Bell, and she is a leadership expert, and her company is growstrongleaders.com. And lastly, we're going to be speaking with Vernon L. Williams, and he is a stress prevention specialist. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, but we are going to have an amazing show for you today. So with that, let me fully introduce my first guest, LaQuan McCarley, and she's a government contracting expert who provides consulting services to help small businesses get started doing business with the federal government. Her firm, Verve Consultants, Inc., provides business development, compliance, proposal management, and certification services for businesses interested in doing business with the federal government. Through her 20+ years of experience, she is familiar with the demands small business owners face, and she's often referred to as a bridge to help her clients get through the hurdles of business ownership and government contracting to reach their revenue goals. LaQuan, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so I got to hear your backstory. How did you become the government contract whisperer? Because I got to tell you, I've been in business 23 years. I was an 8A company, and we never once got a government contract. And so it's hard to do business with the federal government. So please enlighten us how in the world you learned all this stuff.
Well, your story is not any different from a lot of other stories that, have gotten to the government and then they just didn't do well. They couldn't get any contracts or even get past the first stage of go. So I actually started out wanting to be an attorney. And then in that process, I actually worked for a law firm and fell in love with business because we did business acquisition, like licensing and compliance. And I fell in love with it. And so I said, well, if I can help a business understand this process, why not be able to be involved more in the business community? So, of course, my father, who was a dreamer, said, hey, since you know how to put a business together and start it, I want you to do mine. And then I want to challenge you to learn the federal space, because I need to get federal contracting. And at first I was a little bit skeptical, because I said, it's very complicated. It's convoluted. There's so many rules and regulations. It's going to take a lot of time for me to understand it. But fortunately, because of my background, I was able to pretty much understand the process. There were still a lot of hurdles, a lot of research, a lot of asking questions. The information was not as readily available as it is now. We still have a long way to go for a lot of our small businesses to be able to access a lot of the information that other companies may be able to have. So I made it my mission in helping my father to say, hey, I need to understand and learn this, because if it's complicated for me and I can understand it and break it down, I can help other people. And that's what I started to do. I started helping other companies who were either new to the federal marketplace or either was a part of it already, but really still could not get any traction, to understand it, break it down, and be able to give them real and actual actions in order to make their goals.
I love it. I love it. So let's start with how you break it down. I mean, how do you become a contractor to the federal government?
So the first prerequisite is always to just start your business, right? You need to register in the state that you plan on doing business in, right? You need to get your federal identification number from the IRS. You need to have a business bank account. So those prerequisite structures still apply in becoming a government contractor. Now, once you do that, then the key thing to do is to go to www.naics.com. What is that? That is the North American Industry Classification System, and that's where you find your codes to what you do. So that system will help you in that process to understand it. As an industry, if you do training, you put your keyword in and it will give you all the codes related to training. So pick your primary service first. And then if there's other services that are in addition to that, select those as well. Because when you move over to the next system to register as a federal contractor, you will need those codes as a part of that process, along with all of your other prerequisites, right? So you're now moving to the system called sam.gov. Right? To register your business, it's going to ask you a lot of questions. It's going to ask you to pull out documentation that you probably haven't pulled out in a while. And it's also going to challenge you to understand some of the compliance issues that they're going to ask you to be responsible for. And then in that process, once you finish your registration, that system is going to talk to everything behind it to make sure your company is still in good standing, to make sure that you do have a federal ID number, and to make sure that you're matching within their governmental system. And then you'll get your approval letter. And then in that approval letter, it will give you the next steps that you need to take as a new government contractor.
All right, well, let's keep going down the route line. Okay, so now I'm registered. I'm registered in SAM. I got my letter. How do I find contracts? Like, how do I find opportunities? I mean, does the government have a want ads? Like, how do I find what the government buys and who I should be trying to talk to sell my services?
Perfect. So for new government contractors, I'll point you to sam.gov. You're going back to the same platform that you registered in, as they have open and active solicitation opportunities listed there. You can search through your NAICS code, which you've already obtained before applying to become a federal contractor, or you can search through keywords. So this will give you some opportunities that are out there for you that may match what you do. So be careful in reading what the requirements are, understand those key dates that you need to be aware of in order to meet the deadline, in order to apply, right? And present your proposal. And there's a second one that I want to give all of your listeners. It's one called SBA, Small Business Administration Subnet, SUBNET, right? Google SBA Subnet, click on the actual link to that website, and it is a subcontracting opportunity portal that is used by the SBA because of those large contracts that come in and they have a requirement to meet for subcontracting goals, right? So as a new contractor, you may be able to meet some of those subcontracting opportunities with larger companies so you can build your reputation and past performance within the government.
Whew, okay, that's a lot of stuff, LaQuan. Now, listen, doesn't somebody need to know me before I start working on responding to an RFP?
So networking is important, right? So it's going to go hand in hand in parallel. So when you become a new contractor, of course, you're new to the game. Your business may be very young. You can be if you're 2 years or younger, people may not know what you do and who you do it for, or what type of reputation that you have. So of course, the work is much harder, right? Because you have to make sure that you have more visibility. If you're 2 years or more, you may have done some work with some other companies outside of the government, or maybe done something small with the state. And then that way you have built a little bit of past performance. But that networking piece is very important. You want to make sure that you are going to industry days that are being held by agencies. You want to go to the small business workshops. You want to do any type of webinars that are geared towards outreach events for either your industry or small business. So you want to continually network. You want to talk to people. You want to talk to other government contractors who are already on this road, because that connection is our world is very small in the sense of understanding who we are and what we do, but making sure that you're visible.
So when it comes to targeting agencies, how do you what is a simple strategy for how to figure out, whether or not your services are a fit to a particular agency?
So it's research, and it can get complicated with the research, but the government does have another resource, which is usaspending.gov, which gives everything about an agency, how they spend, how much they spend, their divisions. And it takes a little bit of mining on your part as a government contractor to begin looking at that website to understand what agency best fits you, right? So you can also do a Google search as to what agency provides a certain service or procures a certain service to kind of narrow that down as a new beginner. So then that way you can start doing more research on the agency itself. You can actually reach out to their small business office to see what areas or what people you need to talk to in regards to what you provide, and if that agency really is a fit for you. So it takes a lot of research. I won't lie. It's not an easy jump, but once you start doing more of the research, talking to more people, networking, you'll find certain areas of the government that you truly fit in.
Now, should I start out as a brand new federal contractor, like going after 5 agencies, or does it make more sense to focus on maybe like 1 or 2?
So I tell people between 2 to 3 is generally manageable, right? So if you are in an industry for IT, cybersecurity, a help desk, you definitely want to know who's spending the most money, right? For what you're doing with less competition. You don't want to get in a pool of people there are thousands and thousands of contractors, because as a new contractor, it's hard to be seen in that pool. You want to go to an agency that has a smaller pool of people, but you may have more of a niche, like you may have an edge or an industry jump ahead from someone else. So you want to make sure that you're different in what you're providing to the government, that you actually show that difference, and that it can be showcased with that agency. So between 2 to 3 to begin with, just to kind of make sure that you're doing your due diligence and research and understanding what is being required of you as a contractor.
Now, when it comes to all this research and business development, there are lots of agencies out here, or companies, if you will, that will help you with this, or that offer to help you get certified and stuff like that. What kinds of things do you need to be thinking about if you think you want to hire or sort of like outsource your government business development services?
So that's a very good question. And one of the things I would tell people is to make sure that you look at the company in itself and if they have relationships, right? How do they go about opportunities? Are they just looking at opportunities once they come out on the street, or are they actually chasing after what's called requests for information, forecast opportunities? talking to government officials, asking them what are they in search for. So it's all about making sure you understand that company's strategy and how it aligns with your goals, right? So if you're looking to scale your company to a certain dollar volume, then that company should be able to coach you and counsel you into the steps that need to happen, right? So even in the certification process, if you qualify for certifications in the industry and areas that agencies want to see, you want that company to be able to advise you on that. So if there's an agency that loves 8A companies or that loves HubZone companies, or they're struggling to do women-owned small business interest procurements, then your company that you're dealing with will have a little bit of insight for that, because we've been reading the strategy plans. We kind of understand what the government is looking for, some of their pain points, and also if they're meeting their goals, right? Each agency has a goal percentage that they must meet in the business industry, whether it's certification, whether it's small business, whether it's large business, but they have percentage goals. So we want to hold them accountable. So get a company that holds them accountable for you to be seen and used in their procurement cycle.
Great. Well, listen, I have really been enjoying learning about all things federal contracting. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be right back. Are you ready to become a boss? Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady. Click the button below and take my free boss quiz. This assessment will help you learn your entrepreneur type and find the right business model for you. Get this information about the #1 asset in your business. Yeah, that's you. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and we have been talking about federal contracting with my guest, LaQuan McCarley. LaQuan, let's jump into it. What is the best time to look for a government contract?
So this is a two-part question. So the first part is there's always active solicitations within the system. Matter of fact, there's over 2 million that's usually in the government procurement system at any time and at any stage. The second part is industry specific. So if you have a certain niche area, the government works just like a business cycle works. There are some seasons where you are going to do very well and other seasons where there's some downtime, right? So for instance, if you're in the mental health space and then you service the agency services schools, we're going to talk about that, or other institutions that services children, they may be looking to procure prior to the school start year. So you want to make sure that you're looking for opportunities within the government first and second quarter, because that's when they'll be really looking for those services. If you're in an industry, for an example, like construction, IT, janitorial, things that are recurring and needed all the time, you're going to find opportunities that are being rolled out all the time. It's a matter of whether your capability and your business type meets or match that particular opportunity.
So can you explain to us what are the sort of like 4 different types of federal contracts?
Absolutely. So we have what's called a fixed price, cost estimation, time and material, and infinite delivery, infinite quantity, which is known as IDIQs, right? So to go back to the fixed price, it is self-explanatory in its title, is that whatever you tell the government that you can provide that service for, so if it's $100, if it's going to cost the government $100 a month for your product or service and you are awarded that contract, you cannot bill more than $100 a month for that service or product, okay? Unless you have some level of an escalation clause within your contract that gives you room for particular situations, you are locked in to the fixed price in which you have bidded on that contract. For cost reimbursable, so this is a little bit flexible. This is the government saying, hey, we know that it cost us the $100, but every now and then under this particular contract, we have this issue that we may need to do a little bit of an expansion, right? So if that service is requested, what they'll do is they'll put a cost reimbursable piece within your pricing structure to say you are not to exceed this amount of money. It could be $5,000, it can be $100,000, but generally that budget is set by the government that's included within your bidding price. So when your contract is awarded and you're going through the process of providing your product or service, and the situation comes up that there is not necessarily a separate issue, but it has to be related to what you're doing. Like, we're having an event and we need more material, right? You're still providing the day-to-day service, but this event is going to cost us an additional amount for the additional materials necessary. Then you would have to get pre-approved by your contracting officer in order to have that cost reimbursement done. Because when you go to invoicing, guess what? Once you give that invoice over and it says, here's my fixed price, and I've spent $200 more in cost reimbursable. If they don't see a written approval from your CO officer, your invoice is rejected. So that's one of the major keys in knowing about cost reimbursables. Pre-approval is important, and writing is important, so that way your invoice will always get paid. The other thing is time and materials. So time and materials is pretty much just hours, your labor hours versus the quantity of materials being used. You're telling the government, the government lets you know I only need 30 hours for this contract of labor service, along with however quantity of materials at the set price that you've already provided to us. So you have to stay within that framework. So that's time and materials. And it can have a combination of some other portions of that contract. So make sure that you're reading the contract very closely to make sure that your invoicing is in line with the service and products that you provide. So with the IDIQs, an infinite delivery and infinite quantity. So this contract type is for the government who does not understand or have not really narrowed down how much or how long. Right? So there may be a service that's required, but they really don't have anything behind it to say, I only need this amount for this long. So they'll create this contract where they will have contractors to pre-bid, pre-vet under this particular contract vehicle, right, for the particular service. Once they are selected as pre-vetted contractors under this IDIQ, now you're waiting for a task order. That task order is the request for the actual service. So for example, if I'm in the janitorial world and I need this particular building cleaned only for an event or for some type of special conference, it's only going to be for a certain period of time. That is what's put in that task order. And then with that task order, the contracting officer has the ability to say, I'm going to give it to one particular contractor, or I can actually make them compete, but only within the actual IDIQ framework that you have to already be pre-vetted. You can't go outside of that IDIQ and task it out. Once they award it to whoever is within that group, then that task order is signed off by both the vendor and the government agency, right, to lock you guys in and to generate a purchase order, because you want to make sure that the money is allocated to that specific task order. Now, with IDIQs, there are people who have been on them and got no work, right? And then there are people who have gotten a lot of work. But it all depends on the demand. And if the government doesn't understand or know the demand or have history with the demand, this is a vehicle that they will use in order to build that level of history as to whether or not it's viable for it to go to a different type of solicitation process.
All right, so you've just made my whole head hurt.
Sorry.
But it's okay. It's all right. People need to know this information. So now, what kind of compliance comes along with government contracting? Because they don't just give you a contract. They're like, they kind of give you kind of scary contracts, right? So tell me about some of the compliance things that go along in as concise of ways you can tell me. What kinds of compliance issues there are?
All right. So again, complicated, right? The government is not a simple 10-step process. So in the compliance world, your contract with the government is extremely important for you to read and know, and sometimes have an attorney involved, right? They give you a large snapshot of what it's going to look like through the solicitation process. Once you get awarded, then they actually solidify all of that information, give it over to you for review to make sure you understand what your responsibility is, and most times your reporting requirements. So some of those requirements could be equal employment opportunity, affirmative action. It could be biodegradable reports. It could be anything that involves certified payroll, if that's the type of contract that you're under, that they have to verify that you're paying your employees under the particular act that contract has deemed to be important for that particular contract. So make sure that you're reading, ask a lot of questions if you don't understand. If you see anything in that contract that wasn't a part of your process in the solicitation, then you definitely want to make sure that you ask those questions, because you don't want to sign up for something that never got bidded on, right? Because that happens too. And it could be an error on the government's part in preparing the contract. But make sure that you have someone that's involved with you that can actually help you through that process, so you know what you're signing up for, because you are responsible for the fulfillment of that contract.
All right. Well, you have given us so much information. Last question. What is the best business advice anyone has ever given you?
Don't take no for an answer. No, it should be your propelling force to your yes. Always look for people who have the ability to say yes. So when you come to these hurdles within the government and within your business, right? This is all a part of being in business, that you chase the yes and understand, right? So don't take no for an answer. Keep doing your research, learn as much as you can, reach out to people who can help you, people like my company and myself, people who want to see you win, right? And want to see you grow to the place where you want to go.
All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. LaQuan McCarley for Verve Consultants, Inc. She is the lady in the know when it comes to federal contracting. LaQuan, thank you so much. When we come back, we're going to be talking about how you can become a better communicator within your business. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be right back. Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, and I want to welcome you to Small Biz Lady University. Our mission here is to end small business failure. So all of the courses here are about two things: how to become your own boss, or how to make money online. So that's what we do here. So whether you want to learn about email marketing and sales funnels, or you're ready to get started with social media selling, or if you're really just getting started with e-commerce, you might want to jump into our How to Sell and Market Online course. Either way, if you want to learn how to become your own boss and do it well, I have everything you need here at smallbizladyuniversity.com. If you have any questions or have any technical problems getting signed up, just email us at support@melindaemerson.com. Take care. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and I'm so excited to be talking about how we can all communicate better in our businesses. Now, hopefully you're watching us on our Small Biz Lady Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and do not forget to subscribe or leave a comment. Tell us a topic that you might be interested in learning about on the Small Biz Chat podcast in an upcoming episode. Now, let me introduce my next guest. She is Meredith Bell. She's the co-founder and president of Grow Strong Leaders. Her company publishes software tools and books that help people build strong relationships at work and at home. Meredith is an expert in leadership and team communications. She's the author of 3 books and the host of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. Her latest book is Connect with Your Team, Mastering the Top 10 Communication Skills and Peer Coaching Made Simple, which she wrote with her business partner, Dennis Coates. If you all want more information about her, you can go to growstrongleaders.com. Meredith, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Thank you so much, Melinda. I'm excited about our conversation today.
All right. Well, tell me, how did you become a leadership and communications guru?
Well, part of it, of course, is trying to communicate and failing at times. So you learn from your mistakes. But from the time I was in education, working as a teacher first and then working with teachers, communication between people was just something that fascinated me. You know, what worked well, what didn't. And so when I left public education and started my own company, that was what I wanted to focus on, was how do people get along with each other in the workplace. And so teaching people, and you know, a lot of times the teacher learns as much from the student. So teaching these concepts and then practicing them. I've worked with my two business partners now for 31 years. So we've had a lot of practice with each other and have honed our skills over time and have created products that have helped people, you know, improve in these areas and worked with them. So that has all culminated in me knowing a lot of things about what works and what doesn't.
So, how do you think that leadership styles and communication styles overlap?
There's a lot of relationship there. And let's look at a couple of examples. If we have someone who's a hard charger and they tend to be very direct, move fast, you know, then the way they talk is going to be often abrupt or brief, to the point, and they don't want to spend a lot of time with details. On the other hand, someone who has a leadership style that does get more in the weeds and gets more details, they are going to be giving those kind of details. And you can imagine people who are different like that, how trying to communicate with each other could be frustrating if they don't know what's important to the other person. So I think the leadership style needs to be understood both by the leader in terms of self-awareness, as well as the people around them, so they don't take offense or take personally the style that the leader may be using to communicate.
So, when it comes to communication skills, what is the number one skill that good leaders really all need to take note of?
Without question, it's listening, because listening is the foundation of so many other communication skills. That willingness to be open to hearing other opinions, to take time to find out what's really of concern to someone else and not trying to push them, you know, through it quickly to get it so you can get on to the next thing. This ability to listen and understand what someone else is trying to communicate is so critical, and yet it's missing so often for so many reasons. We make assumptions about what the person meant. We don't check. So we respond in a way that doesn't even address what they were talking about. And so we get these, you know, lack of connections that create additional problems. So that to me is the number one. And it ties in with so many other important communication skills, like giving or receiving feedback, like resolving conflict. You know, it's just really, to me, a foundation that most people, unfortunately, think I'm a pretty good listener or I'm a very good listener. And yet, if they asked others, they may not get agreement on that.
Yes, I think that is an excellent point to make. But what would you say are some examples of poor communication?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you've given us some, like, you know, somebody answers the wrong question. I think that's a big one. But what are some of the other things that people probably are doing every day in their business and don't even realize that they may be doing
Yes.
these things?
Well, one is interrupting or finishing someone else's sentence, thinking you know what they're going to say and you want to just move things along. It's very disrespectful, and it can create resentments and hard feelings. And here's the thing, a business owner needs people around them who are willing to tell them the truth. And so if you do things that cause people to back off, to not want to be honest. So another poor communication skill is responding defensively when someone tells you something you don't want to hear, instead of being open to hearing it. Because if you react with anger or you push back or you deny it or have any other negative reaction, the message you're sending to the person is it's not worth it to try to talk to this person. And so you end up with blind spots, you end up with missing information that you could have had otherwise. So I think those are some big ones, just not asking people for their opinions and assuming you know what people want and need.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think that's a very, very legitimate thing. And I know in your latest book, you talk about you describe sort of like 3 kinds of feedback. And I really wanted you to explain that because I was very intrigued by that.
Yes, we spent 3 chapters on that because feedback is also one of those really critical skills. So there's giving positive feedback to someone, which doesn't happen often enough. Too many times the attitude is, well, they ought to be glad to have a job. You know, they ought to be glad to work here. I shouldn't have to point out everything they do. And yet giving positive feedback is so important for people to understand what it is you want more of from them, so they know what to do. The others have to do with critical or constructive feedback, giving that. So how do you give constructive feedback to someone who has fallen short, you know, or made a mistake that had consequences? So knowing how to do that well, so that in the future you get the results you're looking for, is an important skill. And the third aspect of feedback is receiving feedback graciously, so that you don't react defensively. Instead, you welcome it. You thank the person instead of being defensive. So in the future, they feel comfortable coming back to you and sharing other things they've noticed, even ideas that they have about how things could be better.
Now, one of the things that I have been hearing a lot of people talking about, my fellow entrepreneurs, is that people have been struggling in the workplace. You now have 4, sometimes 5 generations of people working in the workplace right now, and people are struggling, right? You know, like people are painting people with broad brushes, like all the millennials are entitled and obnoxious, or oh, the boomers don't like technology, don't want to change, don't want to, you know what I mean? Like everybody's like, you know, got these kind of labels on their forehead, and nobody feels like they're necessarily being heard. And a lot of people spend a lot of time frustrated and frankly struggling to figure out how to be more effective, but also how to feel more valued. Because I think some of communication styles can come off in a way that make people feel dismissed. And I'm wondering if you have some suggestions around, you know, if you've got, let's say, a young employee who maybe has never gotten any negative feedback before, and you are fearful that they are going to completely not react well to it, what is the best way for you to communicate with them in a way that they can actually hear you?
Oh, that's such a good and important question. I think a key aspect is recognizing this is and making the most positive assumptions about the person. Here is someone that wants to contribute and do their best, as opposed to here's someone trying to slack off and do the minimum. If we assume that someone is doing their best, then a good way to start with them is simply pointing out what you value about them, because it is a balanced perspective after all. If you don't have some things you value about the person, why are they working for you to begin with, right? So putting it in context and then being very specific, and let them know you want to share some information with them that you think is going to help them grow in their career, grow in their potential. So they understand that you're not trying to jump on them and criticize them, but you're using this as an opportunity to help them learn. And then you get specific about what was the behavior, the action, the words that created a problem. And what were the consequences? What was the impact? So they understand, they make that connection. Oh, I did this, so it had this effect. And then state what it is you want instead and get their agreement to it. So it's an adult to adult conversation, not a parental thing where I'm giving you direction and this is what you better do from now on or you're out. Anything that comes across as threatening, judging is not going to be received well. But when it's an adult to adult conversation where you're both committing to doing something, that other person, and you simply ask them, here's what I need from you. Are you willing to do that? What do you need from me to make sure you're able to meet that deadline or whatever it is, so that they feel that you're in this with them? I think that's the key thing at the end, is letting them know, we're in this together. I'm on your side. I'm not watching to catch you do things wrong. I want to help you succeed. So getting them to tell you what they need from you, I think, is a great way to wrap it up so that they see you're willing to do some things as well.
And on that note, how can I invite employees or even my loved ones to give me feedback, without like walking around with a sign? Like, how can all of us position ourselves to be more approachable? Because I know, around the holidays, when I think about, let's say my mother being in my kitchen and giving me a full critique of every meal I might prepare, like those are things that's just like, oh my gosh, but what are some of the other ways that I can invite, my son, my brother, like we're trying to deal with hard family issues sometimes. How can we invite people to have a conversation as opposed to, well, you don't do this, right? We kind of default to that. I think when siblings interact with each other, I think we revolve back into that relationship we had when we were all 10, 11 and 12. But I think that how can we all have more productive conversations, sort of like with everybody we deal with?
Yeah. I love your questions. This is such an important area. And I think it starts with recognizing we're all human. I'm not perfect. I have things to learn. And so if we adopt that learner mindset and we're open, then it's easier to go to someone and say, I want to be the best spouse I can be. I want to be the best parent to you. I want to be the best leader for you. I want you to come in every day saying, I love living with or working with this person. So what's one thing I could do that would make that a better experience for you? What's one thing? So you're not asking them to give you a laundry list, right? You don't want it, because it's overwhelming if we have somebody start listing. But one thing, because what's likely to come out is the one thing that's bugging them the most about what you're either doing or not doing. And so and even give them permission to take a minute to think about that. What's one thing? And you can ask this in a variety of ways, but it's basically getting at this question, what could I do better? How can I be a better whatever for you, so that your experience of living with, working with me is as good as it could possibly be? And so I think being specific, and then the key thing is receiving it well. So no matter what they tell you, you adopt a curious mindset. Oh, I didn't realize that. Or, oh, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And if we're not clear on what it is they're asking of us, maybe ask them to give an example of what would that look like to you, so that we don't assume we know what they want, and they have that permission to be honest with us and let us know. And then the key, of course, is follow through. So we don't just listen to it and say, thank you. We look for opportunities if we agree with what they're asking and we realize, oh yeah, that could be a lot better. If I take time to stop and say hi and smile or whatever it is, do that on a regular basis, and then go back and ask them after some time has gone by, how am I doing in that area? I really took to heart what you said, and I'm just curious if you've noticed any difference. So I think that's a key part too, is letting them know, because what that communicates, Melinda, is I cared about what you said. and I want to have a good relationship with you. And so I am making this effort. That's what they see and hear, even if you don't say those words.
I really, really appreciate what you just said so much. I feel like it's going to help so many relationships that I have, whether it's with my employees or my ex-husband or even my family members. So I really, really appreciate that. Now I want to switch gears with you just a little bit. A lot of people are managing remote teams, talking to people on Zoom all day. And do you have different advice for communicating or even like giving feedback over Zoom versus an actual face-to-face meeting?
I guess a key thing is to check with the person up front. Is this a good time for you? Because you don't know what has been going on in the background. In an office environment, you can kind of see if the person's busy, if they're preoccupied, if, what the lay of the land, so to speak. Whereas when they're on Zoom, they could have just had a fight with one of their kids. You don't know what's been going on. And so identifying and being respectful and just asking, I'd like to talk to you about something. Is now a good time, or do you have a few minutes for us to have a focused conversation? I think that's probably the most important piece. And just also asking the person before you jump in, how are you doing? Just taking that few minutes to get them to talk about, because that will open it up and that will tell you what's their frame of mind like right now. Are they going to be able to be in a place to listen? Because sometimes when we need to give someone feedback, we've often mulled it over in our heads. And so when we're ready to do it. And yet it may not be the right time for that person. And so if our goal is getting the result we're looking for, while enhancing the relationship, we really need to be sensitive to, is this the right time for them to be able to respond? And I just think that sensitivity has to be heightened when we're looking at a remote work situation.
Wow, Meredith, you are such a pro at these things. Last question for you. What is the best business advice you have ever been given?
I'd like to share two, because have been both significant to me. One is, when I face a problem, or what I think of as a problem or a challenging situation, I reframe it with this question: given this situation, what would I like to create? And that frame helps me get out of the depths of worrying and the negative emotions, and it frees up my ability to think outside the box, if you will, to think in a bigger, different way, and not even see it as a problem, but just, here's an opportunity where I can do something. And that has made a huge difference. It's saved me hours, days, weeks of being, worried over something instead of thinking creatively about how to do it. The other one is to lighten up, because I tend to be a serious person. I take myself and situations seriously. And by taking a more playful attitude, again, this ties in with being creative, it just releases the positive energy and the ability to do more and think more about how to make the most of whatever situation faces me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Meredith Bell. You are a joy. I really so much have enjoyed talking with you, and you are brilliant. Up next, we're going to be talking about how to manage stress and avoid burnout. You're watching the SmallBizChat podcast, and we will be right back. Are you ready to become a boss? Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady. Click the button below and take my free boss quiz. This assessment will help you learn your entrepreneur type and find the right business model for you. Get this information about the #1 asset in your business. Yeah, that's you. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and I am so excited to speak with my next guest about stress management. His name is Vernon L. Williams, and he calls himself the stress prevention strategist. He's an author, speaker, and coach with a reputation for challenging, encouraging, and equipping clients to prevent stress and burnout. From the beginning of his entrepreneurial career, Vernon has had the reputation of exceeding client expectations and helping people see their problems in a whole new light. He's the author of 8 books, including Top 7 Myths That Perpetuate Stress and How to Dispel Them, and The Power to Rejoice, 21 Days to Victory Over Your Problems. Vernon has created several courses online as well, including Prevent Work Stress and Positive Mindset Strategy for Business Owners. For more information, go to his website, preventworkstress.com. What a great URL that is. Vernon, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Now tell me, how did you get started helping people with stress management?
Well, it goes back to several years ago. I was a corporate manager, and I had worked for this particular company, a major corporation, for 23 years. I was 2 years away from being eligible to retire, and 5,000 of us got the notice that we were being downsized. And everyone I talked to was like so distraught. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to send my kids to school. I'm not going to be able to afford my house. I'm just going to be ruined. And my reaction was, what an opportunity. What an opportunity, because I knew that there was something even better ahead of me, because I know that God doesn't take one thing that's good and replace it with something that's inferior. So that was my confidence. And so that is really kind of the point at which I started to recognize that, as Meredith was saying, we can reframe our situations. And so, and think differently about those situations, because the way it works is we think, and then we feel, and then we act, and then we get outcomes. That's always the way it works. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. We have a thought, and that leads to feelings, and that leads to actions, and that leads to outcomes. And so that's when I consciously recognized that I could literally change the way I felt by changing the way I thought. And so that's what prompted me to then start coaching people on how to change their thinking. And interestingly enough, I had a person who was a business owner, my first client, as a matter of fact, who came to me and said, "You got to help me." He said, "I am just distraught." He said, "I've been in the hospital twice. My blood pressure is off the charts. My doctor said that if I don't change, I'm going to have a stroke. I'm on 15 different kinds of meds." And so I became his coach. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He was my first client. And so I had a 3-hour coaching session with him, and followed up with a couple of telephone calls. And shortly thereafter, he got off the meds that he was on. His blood pressure became normal, and he was, very healthy. Because one of the things about stress that most people probably don't realize, it has a big impact on your health. It minimizes your immune system, which makes you susceptible to illnesses, heart disease, high blood pressure, stomach disorders, and so forth, insomnia, and so forth. So that was kind of my foray into helping people with stress. And of course, I've been doing that for a number of years, coaching and developing content to make it available to people to help them prevent, not manage, stress.
So why do you think stress is such an issue in the American work culture?
Because of the myths around stress. And that's why I wrote that book, The Top 7 myths that perpetuate. Key word being perpetuate, because even though there's all this information, I mean, if you Google the words stress management, you'll get like billions of responses, but yet stress remains the #1 problem health-wise in our country. And so with all that information out there perpetuating the myth, like for example, one of the myths about stress is that stress is caused by circumstances. And of course, that's not true, because as the example I gave earlier, with 5,000 of us getting the same message, if the circumstance is what caused the stress, then all 5,000 of us would have had the exact same reaction, which is being stressed. Even today, if you look at statistics on business owner stress, it'll be something like 57, 58% of business owners say that they're stressed. If being a business owner caused stress, or if the circumstances of being a business owner caused stress, then every single business owner would be stressed all the time. But we know that's not the case. So that's an example of one of the myths that leads to stress continuing to perpetuate itself in our society, despite all of the information that's out there on the subject.
But now, how does stress and worry become like a bad sandwich you don't need to eat? I mean,
oh my gosh.
It seems like one comes and the other one shows up, right?
Yes.
Often happen.
They do often go hand in hand. And stress is about expectations. So what happens is, I've got a circumstance in my life, whether it's my work life or my personal life, I've got a circumstance that does not match my expectations. And that's what causes the stress. There's a disconnect between the circumstance and the expectations. And what I often tell people is, you can't change your circumstances, but you can certainly change your response to the circumstance through your thoughts. And that's what all of us can do. So, so that's how stress comes about. It's about this disconnect between the reality and the circumstances. Worry, on the other hand, is about anticipation of some future circumstance. Worry usually begins with, what if? What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if I don't find a suitable mate? What if I'm divorced? What if my kid doesn't get into the college that I'd like him or her to get into? So it's always about the what if. And by the way, research shows that the average person spends 5 total years of their life doing nothing but worrying. If you added up all of the instances of worry, it would equate to 5 years. That's a lot of worrying. And of course, worrying doesn't accomplish anything. There's a difference between worry and being concerned. One of the concerns I have is driving on the road with all the people who are texting and using their cell phones. So concern is something that you can do something about. So when I am driving and I see somebody kind of looking down and looking up, I'll slow down and let that person go ahead. So that's because I'm concerned. I don't lie in bed at night and go, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to drive because there's so many people out there who are texting and using their mobile device while on the road. So while you can do something about concern, worry, you can't do anything about it.
Well, let's talk about some solutions, because I think about what you're saying, and I remember something my father used to tell me when I was young. He said, "Don't be out here borrowing trouble," and he said that's what he meant when you worry about what if scenarios.
Yeah.
He was like, what are you doing that for? He's like, you're borrowing tomorrow's trouble today. What are you doing that for?
That's right.
Focus on today. But what are some of the ways that we can avoid stress and burnout? Because chronic stress becomes burnout, does it not?
Absolutely. That's what burnout is is the result. Burnout, of course, being defined as emotional, physical exhaustion. And that burnout comes as the result of prolonged stress. And so the way to prevent burnout is to prevent stress, which brings me to what I do. Instead of helping people manage stress, I help people prevent stress. And the way to prevent stress is to, as I said at the outset, change the way you think, because your thoughts lead to emotions, including stress, and which leads to actions and which leads to outcome. So instead of managing the symptoms of stress, the best thing to do is to prevent stress, and hence my process of stress prevention method, as opposed to the stress management method that focuses on the symptoms.
Well, how much does our self-talk feed into all of this, though? Like, isn't it like it starts with, right? So is a man thinketh, it is he. But then it is like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. Why did you make that mistake? Like that's what I'm saying myself.
That's right.
Right, which is perpetuating,
It absolutely does.
Stress and worry.
And my prevention strategy involves, as the Bible says, take each thought captive. We have an amazing gift. It's called self-awareness. We can have a thought and be aware that we're having the thought even as we're having it. So what I coach people on is to stop that thought, being mindful of what you're thinking and stopping that thought and challenging it by asking a question. For example, is this thought helping me accomplish my goals? If it is, then I'll keep on thinking it. If it's not, then it's got to go, and I'll replace it with another thought. I use the analogy of, if you and your spouse decided to go away for the weekend and made a hotel reservation at a certain location, you couldn't just walk in and go up to your room. You'd have to check in at the desk, right? So likewise, we should have each thought that we have check in at the desk and ask a question, is this thought helpful? Or in the case of the hotel, do you have a reservation? If you do have a reservation, then we're glad you're here. Let me swipe your card. Let me get the bellhop to take your stuff up to the room and have a nice stay. But if you don't, then you can stay at some of the other hotels in the area, but not this one. So we need to do the same thing with our thoughts. Is this thought helpful to me in terms of achieving my goals? If it is, then come on in. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're here. If it's not, then you got to go. And this is an ongoing process that we can do, because most people we can have as many as 60,000 thoughts per day, including the self-talk you're talking, 60,000 thoughts. That's a lot of thoughts. And studies show that 80% of those thoughts are negative, self-defeating, that we have. And 95% of them are repeat. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you had an original thought that you'd never, ever had before? So we keep having the same negative thoughts repeatedly, and we wonder why we're stressed. Stress doesn't come from our circumstances. Stress comes from what we think about our circumstances.
Interesting. This is all extremely, extremely fascinating. Vernon, tell me, what is the best business advice you've ever been given?
The best business advice I was ever given was based on a quote by Henry Ford, which said, you can believe you can or believe you cannot. Either way, you'll be right. And so that has helped me tremendously in terms of starting a business and, as we were saying earlier, not taking no for an answer. And of course, that means believing that you can. I believe that I can, as opposed to believing that I cannot. And that's just been the overwhelmingly most beneficial advice I've ever gotten in business.
Well, I certainly think that's excellent advice. Thank you so much, Vernon for helping us. And if you want more information about his programs, head over to preventworkstress.com. Now, what I want to do is bring back all of my guests. So I want to bring back LaQuan McCarley, Meredith Bell, and Vernon Williams. And we're going to have a quick panel that we like to call Hit It and Quit It. Now, this is how it works. I'm going to ask each of you the same question. You only have 30 seconds to answer, and you can't repeat someone else's answer. So since LaQuan, since you've been waiting longest, I'm going to start with you, then you, Meredith, and last you, Vernon, for this very first question. First question is, what is your favorite podcast? LaQuan, what is your favorite podcast?
Oh my gosh, so many. But right now it is the small biz chat, because I want to make sure that I know more about business, that I can give more information and get more back. So that's one of my favorite right now.
All right. So now you're the teacher's pet. Okay. Meredith, what is your favorite podcast?
It's called Tough Talks by Chris Dorris, Dorris. He is an intense, curious person who's really looking at people who have overcome amazing obstacles and used mental toughness to excel. And they're just all very inspiring to me.
Love it. All right, Vernon, what's your favorite podcast?
My favorite podcast would be Tony Kornheiser's podcast on using sports as a means of helping people achieve their life goals. I like that.
I haven't heard of that one. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
All right, here's our next question. Meredith, I'm going to start with you, then you, Vernon, then you, LaQuan. What is your favorite business app? Favorite business app?
All right. Two real quick. Calendly for getting appointments, nothing like it. And then for blocking out background noises, Crisp, KRISP.ai. I use it for my own podcast and recommend it to all my guests. It's amazing.
That's one I don't know. I'm going to have to write that one down. All right, LaQuan, what do you got? What's your favorite business app?
It will be Buffer, because it actually helps to bring out your social media on different platforms all in an instant. You can schedule it, you can change it, you can do all different things in one particular app. So I like Buffer.
Love it, love it. All right, Vernon, what's your favorite business app?
Well, I don't know that this is so business, but Grammarly, I like that because I'm constantly writing and developing courses, and that's just been immensely helpful to me.
I'm a big fan of Grammarly as well, 100%. All right, last question, you guys, and I'm going to start with you first, Vernon, and then Meredith, and then LaQuan. What is the best business book you have ever read? Best business book you've ever read?
Ooh, gosh. Oh.
Or you could even pick the most impactful book you've ever read.
Well, I was thinking about Tony Robbins' book, The Giant Within. That was really impactful for me.
That's a good one. I'll take that.
Yeah.
All right, Meredith, favorite business book?
This has been a huge, impactful one recently that will stay with me. It's called Lead from the Heart by Mark C. Crowley. I just interviewed him recently on my podcast. He has, researched, knows the science behind the benefit and importance of a leader really touching and connecting with someone on a heart level, not just on the mind level, to help them achieve their full potential. It's a very powerful book.
I like it. I like it. All right, LaQuan, favorite business book?
Oh, I would have to say Identity Leadership by Stedman Graham. He has really impacted in the way that I've rethought about leadership when building my business. So yeah, Identity Leadership, Stedman Graham.
I love it. And my favorite business book for this year is Disrupt You by Jay Salmon. I love this book because he says in order to disrupt the world, you have to start by disrupting yourself. And that's why I love this book.
I love it.
So I want to thank all of you, all three of my guests, for being here today. We have had an amazing show. If you're interested in government contracting, check out LaQuan's website, Verve Consultants Inc.com. Thank you so much, Meredith Bell. If you're interested in improving your communications, head over to growstrongleaders.com. And thank you to Vernon L. Williams and he is the stress prevention strategist, and his website is preventworkstress.com. And thank you all for joining me for this episode of the Small Biz Chat podcast. If you are ready to start your dream business in 2023, I have a solution for you. My course, Become Your Own Boss in 12 Months, starts up a brand new cohort with live instruction starting January 31st. So if you are interested in signing up, I'm going to tell you, this course isn't just a business plan course. This course is actually going to teach you how to get your business together and land customers on day one of your business. So if you want to know more information, head over to https://tinyurl.com/BYOB Drexel. Again, that URL is tinyurl.com/BYOB Drexel. We're offering the course in partnership with Drexel University, so you actually can get CEU credits for taking our course as well. The mission of the Small Biz Podcast is to end small business failure. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, America's #1 small business expert, and I will leave you with this last thought. You never lose in business. Either you win or you learn. God bless everybody.